What is this nonsense, Medusa? Let me get this straight. You're not actually in the magazine, you're on the cover of. Well, I don't suppose I should be surprised. But whatever. Now is not the time for reading heavy metal. It is the time for another cracking unboxing and review of a figure. And today we are taking a look at another deadly woman, one of the deadliest, one of the true icons of her kind, and especially of the genre of sword and sorcery. I speak, of course, of Red Sonja. Only none of these. These are only placeholders, because today we are once again within the realm of boxes too big for this humble frame. So, let's waste no time. Oh, a box, a box, a box. A hollow box. Hail, my friends, and disaster. Let me tell you, there I was, having a grand unboxing of Red Sonja, she-devil with a sword, but all the while, unbeknownst to me, my audio equipment had failed. Fiasco. But fear not, for we are still in a fit state to unbox this huge statue of Red Sonja by Sideshow Collectibles, and we shall do that very thing. Ah yes, it's one of Sideshow's so-called premium format figures, as was Conan, which we unboxed here in previous times. Of course, I'm interested to see how one huge statue from the same company stacks up against the other, and I'm also interested to see how Red Sonja, who is a grand icon of sword and sorcery in her own right, stacks up against Conan. Well, why wait? Let's do that right now, or soon. Now then, my initial reaction is now lost to time, but I can tell you, as soon as you open up that foam, you are struck immediately by this, frankly, spectacular base. We'll have a closer look later, of course, but I'm struck by this wonderful design and the details, the gore, the wet textures, the bones. Look at the bones. Ooh, there's bones here too. We'd better take a look at the underside. Hey, here we go. Ah, yes, Red Sonja, premium format figure. What's this number here? 1165 of 1500. And there's all sorts of trademarks and what have you down there. We won't worry about that. No, sir. Now, at this stage, you might think you plonk Red Sonja on the base, and I thought that certainly, but I was wrong. Instead, you need this little implement here. Can you tell what it is? I couldn't, not straight away. It's the serpent's tongue, or the tip of it, and it goes right there. Now, with the serpent's tongue in place, it is time for the most important part of any sword and sorcery hero, the body, especially visually, and in terms of character, because it is, of course, the locus and the focal point of survival, of sex, and, of course, violence, frequently. Now, you have to be careful here, because there's a little, a small labyrinth you have to guide Sonja's boot through, but there she is, settled. Now that the serpent's tongue is flattened beneath Sonja's bloody boot, it's time to get to the head of the matter. Yes, now Sonja's fine head, and hair, and shoulders, or part of them. Like so. Now where would a wandering warrioress be without weaponry? Well, here's a sword. It is a sword of power! Bit of foam in there. Like that. Thanks to magnets. There is another one. You can't have sword and sorcery without a bit of sword action. Like so. There we are. Now I know it looks complete, but we're not quite done yet. There is a gap here on Sonja's thigh, and that is for her dagger. If you like to play fantasy role-playing games, always carry a dagger. Imagine a world where you couldn't go about with a dagger as a general thing. Now that's real barbarism. Now I know it looks done, but not quite. There is still some mysterious stones in the box, and they go on the base. Like here is a gap down here. I don't know if you can see that. And the stone goes like that. If those little gaps where they go were just filled in normally, I wouldn't have known anything was missing. Oh, steady. Right, so surely that's the statue complete, and in a sense it is, but there's a little bit more. You see, there is one more weapon in that box, and it replaces this sword. It is, in fact, a rather large and brutal-looking axe. Well, and and a hand. But this axe is a double-edged sword. You see, it's an exclusive piece. You can only get this axe with this figure if you buy the figure at Sideshow's own shop, and potentially some others as well, I'm not actually sure. But I really wish they wouldn't do that. And I really wish they hadn't done it here, in this piece, amongst all others, and I'll tell you why. It's because this axe completes this figure. Watch. What a silhouette. What a difference it makes. Look, maybe you can't see that all that clearly from this angle, but don't worry, we'll get into it. And as to that, I think it's time that I ducked off and took a couple of nice picky-wickies of this statue so that we can all have a nice close look at all the details and we can ruminate over the deeper ponderings that this statue brings forth. See you soon. Warrior women, they're one of the best possible, the top notch is what I'm saying. And I love them, of course. Why, I was only 6 years old when I first saw Conan the Destroyer, and a lifelong love of the barbarian hero was cemented instantly. But you know who else was in that film? Grace Jones as Zula. Oh, amazing. And the other Conan film has Sandal Bergman. By God, the caliber. No wonder I became so fond of warrior women. After all, would I have given the like of Queen's Blade the time of day had it not drawn from that great canon? Nay. And do you think I chose to collect Sisters of Battle by random chance? Of course not. And who do I always select when playing Golden Axe? The dwarf. And unto this, Sonja. Oh, warrior women don't really come much more iconic than her, if at all. Certainly not in Sword and Sorcery, my favourite fantasy subgenre. So of course I'm going to have a giant figurine statue of Red Sonja in my lands, and I'll tell you this. This is the best of the large-scale statues that I've come across so far, whether in my lands or out in the wild. Now, of course, it may not be the best technically, and it certainly isn't flawless, but it is, up to this point, my favourite, and I think I'd like to discuss why. In quest of this, let's compare Sonja to her closest relative that I have to hand, statue-wise. Anyway, Conan over there, of course. Well, they're both from the same manufacturer, they both have very similar subject matter, they come from the same world, after all. So, how's the comparison? Well, it's pretty close, but I think Sonja has the better of it in a number of important ways. Well, they're important to me, anyway. Sword and Sorcery. Both of these statues are violent images, and they should be. Violence is almost inevitably at the very core of Sword and Sorcery, encompassing the hero's capacity to bodily impose order on a world of chaos, to survive and even thrive through the physical articulation of his, or her, very own will. As the attacker's sword swept at her again, she leapt forward, blade straight out before her. She had a fleeting impression of a glowering, bearded face before it exploded in a bath of scarlet. Sonja whirled and half-crouched. Naked but for her sword belt, knives, and Nemedian boots, she looked like some primitive goddess of war, some legendary queen of slaughter brandishing her red-stained blade. When hell laughs. This is happening in both of these statues, one in progress, that's Conan, and the other in aftermath. But I think it's a sight more effective in Sonja's version, because hers is the violence of flesh and blood. You see, skeletons in this age are rarely frightening or threatening opponents, and their bloodlessness makes violence upon them safer, more consumable, even comfortable. But flesh and blood violence will always be more meaningful to flesh and blood beings like us. More affecting, more shocking, more confronting, more tragic, and more triumphant. And yes, I think more uplifting. In quality Sword and Sorcery that doesn't shy away from or sublimate its violence, you get to drink deeply of these very human emotions when the hero triumphs and strikes down the evil and the monstrous and leaves it broken beneath them, you partake of that triumph and taste a little of the electric thrill of survival and the validation of your own flesh and blood. You matter. This sort of thing is why sword and sorcery, to me, is the most sublime of all fantasy subgenres, and I think Sonja's statue presents this more effectively than does Conan's. Her foe is more threatening, and its gory remains more powerfully suggest the terrific sweep of emotions inherent in violent, triumphal survival on the edge of chaos. It's something that's just not that easily reflected in the surely trivial fallen bodies of skeletons, or calcite slash masters, or whatever they're called these days. But never mind any of that. I want to talk about this axe. I don't think I can overstate the importance of this axe. It is utterly transformative. Without it, this statue seems like part of a tableau, of which Sonja herself is only a fraction. But with it, this becomes Sonja's statue. Sonja's alone, and its landscape belongs to her. Now, let me explain. The major factor is simply that the twin swords, as beautiful as they are not matched to the carnage at Sonja's feet. They didn't do this. And this is a gateway for other observations. Firstly, that if the swords didn't do it, then maybe Sonja didn't do it, at least not alone. But the axe, now there is a weapon that could cleave a serpent, and I believe that with it, Sonja has done exactly that, and is now striding through the bloody ruin that she has wrought. Questions about whether she's got enough blood caked on her and the like, well, they just vanish. See, with the axe, Sonja is able to take possession of all of this violence, and the statue becomes a portrait of a warrior. And that is when the statue is at its best. It makes Sonja look like something approaching, what was it? Some legendary goddess of war. That ultimately is why I am so mad that this axe is an exclusive feature. I'm almost certain that this figure was sculpted with the axe in mind, that it was completely intended to be viewed that way. Making it an exclusive and therefore present in maybe only a fraction of copies of this statue is a betrayal of the statue and of the craft and the artistry and of the people who were intended to enjoy it, and I hold that Sideshow should be ashamed. Although maybe less ashamed than this other exclusive where it looks like Batman has ripped Superman's eyes from his head in what has to be the most pathetic attempt at heat vision that I think I've ever seen. But that's a whole other thing. Now, what was I talking about? Who cares? This is what my dog looked like. Oh yeah, Red Sonja. These are both cracking statues, but I think Conan has hoarded in on this video enough. There we go. And, see, we're at risk of it becoming like the film, where he keeps swinging in to steal all of Sonja's battle glory for himself. Bloody Conan. Oh, excuse me, Calidor. Well, then again, this film features Bridget Nielsen and Sandal Bergman. Oh, my God. But whatever, in examining this statue, I've actually become more interested in seeing how it measures up as a portrait of this character. And in quest of this, I'm going to compare it to what is, for me, the defining Red Sonja image. And that one is this one. Endithor's Daughter by Boris Vallejo. What a cracking image. It's all-encompassing, and I like it so much, I hung it on my wall. Vallejo did a whole series of Red Sonja paintings, and the reason I choose to focus on this one, mainly, although I think When Hell Laughs also was worth a look, is because it's so complete as a portrait. Everything in it helps you to understand who Sonja is. Now, straight off, we can see that it's a very lonely image, and I see it as one of heroic isolation. Very much of the same breed as an illustration that we have seen here previously as part of that more recent version of Warhammer Quest. And that image and this one have a lot more in common than you might initially think, but that's a different thing. Heroes is what I'm talking about, and heroes aren't normal people, and Sonja is certainly a hero. Vallejo's painting shows us this by putting her out there in the domain of the hero, the wilderness, from which the normal world of ordinary life is only distantly visible. So, what's out of the ordinary about Sonja? Well, for a start, she's a warrior. And because of that, the life of an ordinary woman of her world is closed off to her. But she certainly is a woman, so she likewise can never be an ordinary warrior of her time. She's virtually unique. There are so few people like her that her being a hero is basically a formality because, well, who else is she going to relate to? And then there's that tricky vow of hers. Here's how it goes, at least according to the version that I have to hand. Well, let's see. A young Sonja sees her family murdered, and she herself is brutalized in predictable fashion by some rough mercenaries of the age. And in her misery, she has a vision. A gleaming figure, a goddess, a vision, something. And it speaks to her, and among other things, it says, "If you but have the will, Sonja, you may use your strength to make the world your home. You may become a wanderer, the equal of any man or woman you meet. But first, you must make a vow to me, Sonja. You must never allow yourself to be loved by another man unless he has bested you in fair battle. Something no man is like to do after this day." And Sonja agrees and immediately goes out and wreaks bloody revenge with previously unheard of combat skills. It's amazing. It doesn't matter if the spirit was actually real or not, only that Sonja lives as though it was. And in doing so, she does what a great number of chivalric heroes do. She takes on heroism by surrendering her sexual freedom. This is an aspect of Sonja that's very prominent in Vallejo's painting, much more so than any other Sonja picture that I have seen. It's there in these distant erections of civilization and in this delicate grasping of the sword. And it's there in this gaze, which is reflecting, quite sadly, I think, on the great sweep of ordinary human experience that Sonja will never get to know. Alright, I've got a confession to make. I have never read any of the comics on which this version of Red Sonja, this statue, is based. As a matter of fact, it was only relatively recently that I read the original run of comics that Red Sonja was in the first place. Not counting the Savage Sword of Conan, of course. Besides that, the only Red Sonja that I'm really familiar with is the one featured in this cracking series of old novels. So imagine my surprise, if you will, when I learn from my friend, the elf, that this version of Sonja lacks that very interesting vow of hers. I find all of this highly intriguing. A version of Sonja without one of her defining experiences and one of her fundamental traits. And the very thing that, for me, tilts Sonja toward the chivalric side of Amazonian heroism rather than the barbarian one. So, we've got these two very different images of Sonja, drawn from two, at least somewhat different versions of the character. But lo, what forces of fate dared to conspire to give them both such a similar expression? What sorcery is behind this? Well, I don't know, but it makes for an interesting comparison. Although, I've got to tell you, I think it's one of the real weak points of the statue. Matter of fact, I'd go so far as to say that it's the Achilles heel. Now, let's have one more little look at Endithor's daughter. There we are. It's a nice, quiet, and introspective scene. Here, Sonja's relaxed and thoughtful expression is completely at home. Now, look at the scene of the statue. Sonja has just performed a mighty feat of survival. She's met this great thing of chaos in battle and smote it to a bloody ruin. Her weapons are smoking with its blood. She has just ripped her life from the very jaws of death. Surely this woman is due a little emotion. But there is none, really. There's no passion, no satisfaction, no relief, no joy. This says that the carnage at her feet has no meaning, that it's trivial, that Sonja was not threatened by this terror, that she did not struggle and was not challenged, and therefore did not triumph. This conflicts completely with the rest of the image, the rest of the genre, and, I think, the very character of Red Sonja. The idea of the life and death struggle, the exhilaration of battle and victory, and the triumphal validation of life is the very thesis of sword and sorcery. The entire rest of the statue seems ready to capture that powerful essence, but whoops, there it goes, slipping out the gap atop Sonja's neck. It's a real shame, because here, look at this. This is one of the best and most technically excellent and accomplished bases that I have ever seen on a figure, and it's criminal to see it cheapened like this, robbed of power and meaning. Now, look at Sonja's physique. Now, it's not as technically sound as the base, I admit, but it is full of tension and energy. Why, it's electric. Muscularity, but even this is betrayed. There is a time, absolutely, in sword and sorcery images for steely gazes and barbarian glowers, and for thoughtful, distant expressions, as I judge this one to be. And some of the best of them are even amid the bloody ruins of enemies. Why, there's even a time to show your hero blasting down foes who have no hope of challenging them, though I dispute that they should be po-faced while doing so. Actually, if you'll indulge me, I would like to retroactively laud the Conan statue for really selling the struggle despite his opponents being, well, you know. In any case, the time for straight-faced, emotionless heroes is certainly not in the immediate wake of a bloody dance on the razor's edge of death with something so monstrous, chilling, and inhuman as this. Because it's a monstrous, chilling, and inhuman response. And that doesn't sound like Sonja, not the one I know. And from what I've seen so far, it doesn't sound like this one either. The devil of this is that it's so close. It wouldn't take a big expression like Conan has over there in order for this statue to be truly excellent. Just a little hint of something right there. Why, here is a little something. Whatever else might be said about this image, look at that face. It's so subtle, there's almost nothing to it, and yet it colours the whole... Alright, I'm putting a stop to this, otherwise I'll wind up harping on for 3 hours about a really small, significant, to me, but still quite small crack in the facade of what is still, I think, the best of the large-scale statues that I have seen thus far. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got some Red Sonja-related reading to catch up on. And I'm talking about the old stuff, of course. My reading hat. Rats that look like men.